Debate 2022 is in the books, so let's dive in. We're going to have a discussion. Joining us now, and we'll introduce our guests in the order of precedence from the last House, as we did during the Leaders' Debate. In the nation's capital, Kate Harrison, Conservative strategist who worked with the PCs under Tim Hudak and John Tory. She is Vice Chair of Summa Strategies Canada. In Brockville, Ontario, Cameron Holmstrom, longtime NDP strategist who sat on the party's executive and who was co-chair of the party's Indigenous Peoples Committee. He's a consultant with Blue Sky Strategy Group. In East York, in the provincial capital, Ashley Chinati, Liberal strategist who worked in Premier Kathleen Wynne's office. She's now a senior consultant at Macmillan Vantage. And in Parry Sound, Jackie De Silva, campaign strategist and former chief of staff to the Green Party leader, Mike Schreiner. That's her. Did we miss Ashley earlier? Should we get a shot of Ashley here? Do we have Ashley? Because I took a peek down and I didn't see her. I don't know, maybe we're having trouble. There she is. All right, Ashley, good to have you here. Okay, everybody. Obviously, I think I know what your first answers are all going to be in terms of who won the debate, so let me not ask that obvious question. Let's try with this. What did your leader do tonight that you really liked? Kate, start us off.
I think he did a really good job defending the record, and that's really the key goal as the incumbent premier and leader in a debate like this, is to state really clearly what you've done and where you want to take the province going forward. And I think that Mr. Ford did a very good job of saying, kind of XYZ, the progress that he felt the party has made on things like hospitals, things like highways, education, and of course, jobs in the economy. So he was very good at using the rule of threes in terms of trying to make his point. And I think that that'll resonate with voters that were watching. Cameron,
what did you like about Andrea Horwath's performance tonight?
I like how she made the contrast. She really had to make the point this time that I'm your option to replace Doug Ford as premier, while reminding people of frankly, the downfalls of the Ford government, but also reminding everyone of the last 15 years prior to that of the Liberal government. I know many of my Liberal colleagues have wanted to not talk about that as if Stephen Del Duca is a greatly experienced person, but don't dare talk about the experience and what it was. And I think it's good for people to be able to form their decision, be able to make a clear decision of, you know what, you may be against this guy, but you actually have an option to choose for something, not just against it.
Ashley, first debate for Mr. Del Duca. How do you think he did?
I mean, I think he did great, especially for a first debate, right? Ms. Horwath has had a few kicks at the can, and as much as she's gotten great at opposing, I'm not sure she put forward a vision for governing, and she spent more time going after Mr. Del Duca than after Mr. Ford. And I think Mr. Del Duca made a really great point when he said, the only person who smiles when progressives fight each other is the incumbent premier. And I think, Mr. Del Duca made a really great case for himself and for the Liberal Party and its vision to repair a lot of the damage that's been done under Mr. Ford over the past 4 years. He talked a lot about affordability. He talked a lot about investments in education. He talked a lot about what he's going to do instead of building Highway 413. So I think he laid out a great vision, but he also came off as a great alternative to Mr. Ford. And for his first time on the main debate stage, I think he did a great job.
Jackie, also the first time on the main debate stage for your leader, Mike Schreiner. What did you like about his appearance tonight?
Yeah, certainly. It was a historic moment for Mike and the Ontario Greens. And I think that as we've seen when Greens join debate stages across the country, he brought new perspective and issues that the other leaders do not bring to the table, like climate change, solutions to the climate crisis, like doubling ODSP and fighting poverty. He was the only one to really, in my perspective, hold Ford accountable for the things that he's done in the last 4 years and hold his feet to the fire in a passionate way. I'm also really proud to hear the voice of nurses being told today through Mike Schreiner tonight. So really proud of his performance tonight.
All right, let me ask the four of you now to look on the opposite side of the coin, and I'd like you to pick one thing from the debate tonight that you think was really lousy. That was the one thing that you thought, boy, that did not come off well. Kate, start us off.
I won't say the moderation, Steve. I think that was totally good.
Appreciate that.
No, I think that for me, where there was an absence of tension and excitement and inspiring debate and vigor was really between Andrea Horwath and Stephen Del Duca. I think that the reality based on public opinion polling today is that Doug Ford is likely to be reelected. And so we're really looking at how the second place race may shape up. And I was a little bit surprised to see what I felt was Andrea Horwath sort of resting on her heels a little bit and not engaging with Del Duca in the way to draw the contrast with him that I think she needed to do tonight, Steve, to make sure that it was clear that she should be the consensus choice for those that want to try and get Doug Ford out of office. So I was waiting for that moment to be kind of inspired or moved by what the NDP had to say and really try and put a pin in what looks like an upward trajectory of momentum for Stephen Del Duca, and it didn't happen, and that was really unfortunate.
Cameron, what did you see about the debate tonight? And when you saw or heard it, you thought, boy, that just did not work. That stank.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple things jumped to mind right away. And the first, Steve, I got to thank you for this, because with your land acknowledgement at the beginning of the debate, that was the lone mention of Indigenous peoples throughout this entire debate. So merci miigwech for that. But at the same time, well, what the heck? I don't know how you go an hour and a half and talk about mental health, COVID care, all this stuff that we've talked about, and somehow that never came up. Even in the section about racism and whatnot, somehow that didn't come up by anyone. So massive fail on all parts there. But also, I have to admit, as someone who worked in Jack Layton's caucus, Mr. Del Duca's attempt at stealing Jack's line 11 years later that was used against Mr. Ignatieff, I thought was rather a real clunker, but also kind of tone deaf.
Yeah.
It worked for Jack because A, we're talking about votes in the House, not question period, actual votes of consequence, where Mr. Ignatieff didn't turn up. But B, Mr. Ignatieff at least had a seat. He was there. So was Jack. He was there doing the job every day. Mr. Del Duca doesn't have a seat right now. In fact, he lost his seat last time. So it's kind of hard for him to criticize other people's attendance when the voters of his riding said, guess what? You don't get to attend for the next 4 years. It doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah, that moment 11 years ago was a real dagger into the Liberal campaign when Jack Layton brought it out at that leaders' debate, for sure. Ashley Chinatti, tell me, you saw something in the debate tonight that really grinded your gears. You didn't like it. What was it?
So, I first just want to quickly address the point about Mr. Del Duca raising Ford's attendance record, because I do think it matters to people at home to know that their premier is there and in the legislature and responding to questions, especially in the middle of a global pandemic. And I don't think Mr. Ford was responding to questions from the opposition. He would show up for the cameras for a press conference, but he didn't show up to question period. And I think that says a lot about his work over the last 4 years. But I will pick up on a missed opportunity in the racism section. And not only was I also disappointed not to hear more about reconciliation throughout the debate, but I would say in particular in that section, if we're talking about extremism, it might be in another country, but Buffalo's just across, Niagara Falls from our province. And I think it was a bit remiss on all the party leaders' points not to acknowledge the tragedy that is so top of mind on so many people's minds, and how many similarities there are to other recent terrorist acts here in Canada of a similar racially motivated nature. So I think those were sort of two missed opportunities in a very nonpartisan way that I think all the party leaders didn't do enough to address those subject matters.
Jackie, what was a miss from your point of view?
Yeah, I think that as we've seen so far in this election period, the majority of Ontarians are tuned out of the election. They're frustrated by the leadership that we've had over the last 4 years, but they don't feel like they have a voice to change that. And I feel like when now they're tuning in hopefully starting to tune into this election, they see the three parties bickering, talking over each other, trying to undercut or undermine each other, and not do so in like a calm, collaborative way, then I feel like it just buys into, more apathy. And so I think that we could have, and you did a great job, Steve, and so did Althea, to keep that at its limits. But I was disappointed to see the kind of bickering and talking over each other that did happen.
Understood. Okay, let's bring another voice into our conversation now. And joining us from the Fourth Estate on the fourth floor of our building is Alison Smith. She's the founder and publisher of Queen's Park Today and co-host of the Canada Land provincial podcast, Wag the Dug. And Alison, unlike everybody else I've been talking to so far, you are non-aligned, nonpartisan. You're going to tell us like it is right now and give us your sort of top-of-line takeaway from how tonight's debate went.
Sure thing. Well, I think ultimately it went well for PC leader Doug Ford because he, as all the polling shows us, this is his election to lose. And really neither Andrea Horwath or Stephen Del Duca I think came at Ford with, the type of fire in their bellies that, and digs at him that would have really thrown him off base. I think we saw more of that, honestly, from Mike Schreiner than the other two who are close to second base. Or second place. I'm interested in the fact that neither Horwath or Del Duca really seem to be trying to scare the public into what a re-elected Ford government might be like. We saw a very sort of aggressive Ford government right after they were first elected in 2018, and they've really moderated since then. I think a line of attack I was maybe expecting is, that are you not worried what a re-emboldened Ford government might be like for you? Although they did try that a little bit with the private hospitals line that Stephen Del Duca pushed. And Steve, I was asked to tonight do some fact checking. So that is when I wanted to point out the Liberals and some of the health unions have pushed over the past few months a line that Christine Elliott said earlier this year. She said that we're opening private hospitals. She said that in the capacity of the province was under an emergency order, and private hospitals, which we have about a dozen of here in Ontario, were closed under that order. And she was saying we're opening them back up because the emergency order is lifting. And that's been taken out of context by a lot of people as a bit of a fear-mongering tactic. And I think that if the Liberals are so worried, or the NDP, that the Conservatives are moving really quickly or aggressively or secretly planning to privatize healthcare, they should have a better example of it than one that's taken out of context.
Okay, gotcha. Let me, what do I want to say here? Let me state at the outset that this is a television experience, watching a leaders debate. So the fact that I'm in a studio watching them 6 feet in front of me means that I'm not experiencing this in the way that you all did or the people at home did who were watching this. I can tell you that the moment that I thought that was the most dramatic in the debate was this one. Let's come back and chat after we show it. Sheldon, if you would.
Mr. Del Duca, I just want to remind you, under yourself and the former Premier Kathleen Wynne, you destroyed this province. The economy was going downhill quicker than the Canadian bobsled team. It just continued going down. 300,000 jobs left this province. That's 300,000 people couldn't pay their rent, couldn't pay their mortgage, couldn't put food on the table because of your terrible policies. You want to bring back the license plate stickers, as you did,
No,
and you raised it every single time. You want to increase the tolls like you did before on the 412 and 18. You actually
check the pledge.
It was your tolls. So
OntarioLiberal.ca.
And we're going to cut, Mr. Del Duca. We're going to cut the gas tax. You're all in favor of hiking the gas tax. You're in favor of the carbon tax. We aren't.
Oh my goodness! He's here tonight bragging like he deserves a medal or a pat on the back about supporting public education. Your record on public education, Mr. Ford, is an embarrassment, and you should be ashamed of yourself for what you have done to kids across this province, like mine and the hundreds of thousands of others that just want a premier who understands that you have a moral obligation to get public health care right, and you, sir, have failed this province.
Let's get some chat about that. Allison, what'd you think of that moment?
That was a strong moment for Stephen Del Duca, but I would throw back to the very first part of that clip that you showed. That was the first sort of showdown moment between Doug Ford and Stephen Del Duca on affordability. And Stephen Del Duca let the attack moment pass there. He just talked up a few Liberal plans and then let you, Steve, throw it over to Ford. So he was really, it seemed like he was more focused on getting Liberal policy out, which is fine. That's something he's been doing a lot on the campaign trail. I am just, concerned that they have so much policy, which I suppose lots of people like Ashley probably think is a very good thing. But is it really breaking through? And was he losing an opportunity there right at the beginning of the debate to try to knock Ford off his game? Well,
let me ask the reps of the two parties about that one. Kate, do you think that Mr. Del Duca had your guy on his heels there?
I'm not so sure. And I think that it's really hard to make the argument that you're the agent for change when you've been in the chair in a previous time. And I think that for both Andrea Horwath and Stephen Del Duca, they face this as a challenge. They're in a really tough position to position themselves as an outsider who's going to bring about this change from the government, or toward the government, excuse me. So I'm not sure that it landed in the same way. We all saw the school closures that happened while Stephen Del Duca was a cabinet minister. That's still fresh in a lot of people's minds, especially voters in rural Ontario. So I'm not sure it landed. And what I did see Doug Ford do well in that exchange is bring this back to the issue that most people, most voters care about right now, which is affordability. And if the ballot question were public education, maybe this would be a bit of a different dynamic, but it's not. The ballot question is going to be who's going to make your life more affordable, and the answer on that, based on the clips that you've shown, is quite clear.
Ashley, your candidate finished very strong at the end of that exchange, but how about the beginning? The suggestion from Allison was that he got run over a little bit off the top there.
So I think off the top, he did have a number of policies he wanted to get through to respond to what Mr. Ford said. But I think at the end, that moment was really poignant for a lot of parents, because there were parents who are still living with a lot of trauma and a lot of challenges in their household because of what has happened during the pandemic with education. And Mr. Ford did not give us a strong answer tonight about what he intends to do about online learning. We know this is something the Tories have been trying to push as a cost-cutting measure in education. And we have seen over the past 2 years a very clear case study that it does not work. We need kids in the classroom. And I think that is a moral duty of the Ontario government to provide equitable public education. And the Ford government has sought to undermine it, cut it, hand out rapid tests to private schools at the expense of public schools, and put forward an education budget that's going to be slashed by $1.3 billion in coming years. So I think at the end there, that passion we saw from Mr. Del Duca was really genuine, and from his own experience as a parent who's lived through this pandemic with his own kids, online learning at the kitchen table.
All right, Cameron, let me get your take as a guy who's seen enough leaders' debates over the years. That Ford-Del Duca exchange, who got the better of it, do you think?
To be honest, that exchange typified the thing I dislike about both of them the most. The fact, well, first off, with Mr. Ford, he has this tendency to blow things up. You were destroying the province and it was terrible. It reminds me of Donald Trump in 2016 saying that northern New York State was a hellscape and everything else. It's like, yeah, I didn't like the previous Liberal government, but it wasn't this terrible hellscape of a thing either. He said there haven't been any new medical schools in 30 years. Well, the Northern Medical School was built in my alma mater at Lakehead, and then I know also at Laurentian. Like, that was a decade ago. That's demonstrably false. But at the same time, with Mr. Del Duca, he's doing this thing where it's trying to pivot away from his own record. Again, it's look at me, I'm experienced, but don't look behind the curtain of the experience. And that doesn't wash with me, even on the education piece. He's making promises he cannot keep. My wife is a teacher, and in her school right now, they are short about 3 qualified teachers, and their supply pool is completely drained. So where are you going to find the teachers to do this? And not that we don't want to, it's not that we don't want to pay for it. They just don't exist. So, but at least be honest with me about that. And that's the problem I have with this. So you're putting this big grandiose vision out there that we're going to have 10,000 new teachers, but you can't actually deliver that. It cannot happen right away. So at least be straight up about that. And he doesn't do that.
Jackie, how did you rate that exchange?
Yeah, I think that I agree with Cameron on this one. I think, seeing Ford sort of put blame on someone else is what we've been seeing him do the last 4 years and not take responsibility. And I think it's frustrating for a lot of students and educators to hear him do that. And I also think for Del Duca, this debate was a way to actually up the awareness of him. So when people on the street or a regular average person is asked about the name Del Duca, oftentimes it's, I don't know who that is, or who are you talking about? And I think that, unfortunately, I think in this, partially in this exchange, but also in the debate, he kind of came across as talking down a little bit to voters, as talking down to the other leaders. And it didn't come across as genuine or as a leadership status to me.
Cameron, let me get your take on the exchange between Doug Ford and Andrea Horwath, where, I mean, we know there is a real cleavage between the public sector unions and the private sector unions. And Doug Ford, I mean, almost taunted Andrea Horwath when he said, look, I've got 3 private sector building unions that are for me. We thought you were the party of the blue-collar worker, of the workers. Well, you're not. It's me now. Is Andrea Horwath on her back legs as a result of that attack?
I wouldn't say that part with her. I think there's been a general movement in some unions. And I say, as full disclosure, I do some work with LIUNA, and they were more aligned with the Liberals before. And I think it's more of an anti-Del Duca move there than an anti-Horwath move. And yes, while there are those unions that are going more conservative, you've got some like the steelworkers, which are skilled trade worker unions that are still firmly in the NDP camp. So labor is not this monolithic being where everyone goes in one direction. It never has been. Whether it was the old auto workers under Buzz Hargrove or what we're seeing now, there's always been one group that cleaves off in another direction for their own reasons. And you know what? That's healthy for democracy, if you ask me. Because at the end of the day, they have to represent their members. And that gives them more power than just being absolutely uniform in one direction all the time.
Kate, I don't know if this is a big deal or a little deal. You're going to tell me. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. But the rules about this debate were pretty clear. No cheat notes, no binders. And Doug Ford brought in a binder. His co-panelists did not make a big deal out of it, but the fact is he did a lot of reading out of his binder tonight. Why did he break the rules?
Well, I think it's probably more a matter of comfort than anything. I do think that, Doug Ford seemed the most at ease on that stage. Again, I think that for Horwath and Del Duca, there was a little bit of an authenticity gap in terms of the types of responses that they were putting out there.
They didn't need binders to read their answers out of.
Yeah, but he's also got the record to defend, right? He's got 4 years of a previous track record that he has to have at his fingertips. And again, I don't think that it's that big of a stretch for voters to think that it's a big deal to have some preparatory notes or something of that nature. But I also thought that his answers were the most emotive and the most authentic. And I think that as a viewer, that's what you're looking for from your leaders, is the feeling that you get. And I question, perhaps with the exception of Mr. Schreiner, who I think actually did a very good job this evening and probably will see an uptick as a result of his performance. I think the other two struggled to find that authenticity and communicate that to voters in a way that would motivate them outside of the status quo we're seeing in the polls right now.
Allison, I presume you watched this debate from the media room where all of your colleagues in the Fourth Estate were. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what the chatter was in that room when Doug Ford started to look into his binder, which, as we say, was against the rules to bring into the debate.
Yeah, we actually got to watch the TVO feed that started before the sound came on, and we saw the leaders enter on the TV and him carrying his binder. So there was a small chuckle, but the other leaders did have pieces of paper and pens on hand.
Which was within the rules.
Yeah, like I do right here, also within the rules of this interview, I hope. I would say that I think, honestly, the binder, I can't really tell how much it helps Ford, to be honest. I think it is distracting when you can see him reading from it. And I also found tonight, more so than the Northern debate, to be honest, that he wasn't really speaking in full sentences a lot of the time. He was saying a lot of the right words, but the conjunctions perhaps that flowed between them were sort of lacking, which made a lot of his stuff a little bit difficult to understand, I think, especially to a viewer who isn't well acquainted with the policies. So I don't know if it's actually as much of an edge as he might and his team might think so.
I want to ask Ashley about that, because in the last few days, your leader has made it a point when he's been out giving speeches on the stump to say things like, Doug Ford doesn't know what he believes unless he reads it out of a binder prepared by his people. He's used that line a lot. He really didn't go hard on that tonight. Do you think he missed an opportunity there?
I think he got it in a few times. But I think the important thing to remember is that, Mr. Ford, even with a binder in hand, got basic facts wrong, said, we're going to take 1 billion cars off the road by building EVs instead of 1 million, or the equivalent of that in emissions. It's not easy to speak extemporaneously, and no one's going to say Mr. Ford is the greatest rhetorician of our time. But I do think it behooves the people to know whether or not they have a premier who does their homework and can retain and understand policies without a constant set of speaking notes in front of them. Of course, all politicians need briefing books. The bigger your portfolio, the bigger the briefing book. There's going to be a lot of details you need to know. But I do think it says something about Mr. Ford and his government's ability to handle the details. When he can't speak without prepared notes all the time. He loves to talk in big, grand ideas of we're gonna save people hundreds and thousands of dollars, or we're building billion-dollar promises and plants and 300,000 jobs and sort of these big figures. But when it comes to the little details, the actual things that make government work and tick, he doesn't tend to put too much weight in them. And I think we've seen that with some policies. The childcare rollout in this province, a year delayed, there's a lot of providers who are scrambling to understand how they even apply. And there are parents who are waiting for that relief to the promised $10 a day childcare. And this hasn't been an issue on the campaign, but lots of private providers are struggling to apply or understand if they're even eligible. And there's a lot of little details like that throughout his time in office. And we saw that with the pandemic decision to close playgrounds and tap police to card people whether they wanted to go out of their house,
and those things were mentioned in the debate tonight. Yeah. Let's. This was an historic debate in the sense that it's the first province-wide debate ever in which there were more than 3 leaders on a stage. That's never happened before. First leaders debate in 1971, and here we are all these years later, 51 years later, before we finally got a 4th person on stage, and that was Mike Schreiner. Because he won a seat 4 years ago, he was entitled to a position on the debate stage. Let's watch a bit of his work tonight. Sheldon, clip 2, if you would.
Not only is this Highway 413 and Bradford bypass bad enough, but then he rerouted the highway just to be able to support a few additional land speculators who are going to get even wealthier off of this highway, putting it through a more even reckless environmentally path. The Bradford bypass. When a golf course donor said, hey, we don't want it through our golf course, he rerouted it around them. He will roll out the red carpets for the Amazons of the world and the big box stores of the world. But when it comes to supporting local farmers, he'll pave over their farmland, hurting our economy. When it comes to protecting us from flooding and the climate change, he'll pave over the wetlands that clean our drinking water and protect us.
Mr. Schreiner, if it was up to you and up to the 3 of you, you wouldn't build nothing.
That's one of Allison's favorites, I'm sure, the double negative. You wouldn't build nothing. But you know what? People knew what he meant. And that's, I think, important to point out as well. Jackie, okay, your guy was in there, first time ever, as we suggested. How did the inclusion of the Green Party change the dynamic of the evening?
Yeah, well, I think that just as we saw in Queen's Park over the last 4 years, Mike punched well above his weight again here on the stage, and for the first time on the stage. And I think that it brought a lot of heart and passion to the debate in a way that we didn't see certainly from Ford. He sounded scripted. He sounded like he had been practicing these lines to get those punches in, those political punches in. And I think having Mike at the debate kept a real heart in the debate. And again, he punched well above his weight.
Allison, how would you gauge Mr. Schreiner's inclusion in tonight?
Oh, I agree. I think that Mike Schreiner did a great job. He is a fiery fellow. He brought a lot of energy, and he honestly seemed the most angry about how the province is being run when compared to Andrea Horwath or Stephen Del Duca, to be honest. So I thought he was an exciting addition. And I mean, that clip that you just played there, he's really spelling out things that were very big scandals for the PC government. Just a couple years ago, he's talking about the minister's zoning order that the province issued, which ended up being for an Amazon factory in Pickering, I believe, that was going to pave over a wetland. We saw conservation authorities or the Greenbelt, like people were quitting their jobs over this, and it became such a scandal that Amazon walked it back and said, we don't want this MZO anymore, because it became that politically disastrous for everyone involved. So, the fact that that Mike Schreiner's the one up there really pointing this out, I mean, that has to get under Doug Ford's skin, even if it is coming from a guy who doesn't actually who isn't actually a political challenger to Doug Ford or the PC party.
Well, let me ask about that because, and Cameron, I'll bring you in on this. We know that federally, New Democrats, Liberals, they were not really very excited about the notion of Elizabeth May, for example, participating in federal leaders' debates because the theory was that she would eat the lunch of the progressive parties. Whatever percentage of votes she was going to get, she was going to take away from the NDP or the Liberals. And I wonder whether you think Mike Schreiner did a good enough job tonight to make your candidate nervous about the fact that, who knows, maybe he just took some votes away from your party.
You know what? I think from our side in this debate, I think we were fine with how Andrea did. And I don't think there's a concern about that. Mr. Schreiner did a good job. He acquitted himself very well, was knowledgeable, and I think he reassured himself his re-election in Guelph. But I don't think it gets him anything more than that at this point. I think the interesting comparison, though, to Elizabeth May, though, I think the big gripe at the time, the big problem we had at the time, is that Elizabeth May was almost the Liberal B candidate on this stage, not the Green leader on the stage, and really just spent a lot of time backing up whoever the Liberal leader was at the time. I think that's what probably made more of the concern. Whereas Mr. Schreiner really stood on his own 2 feet and really just went at it for himself. He threw himself out there. And I think that's the great thing about being in that position if you're him, is that you're fighting for everything and you really have nothing to lose in the process, right? It's a little bit of a liberating sensation to know that you can just throw it all out there, leave it all on the floor, and then know you did your best. There's something about that. So, it comes across well because you're just not holding back. And he definitely didn't hold back tonight.
Ashley, can I get your take on that? Because, as I say, if Mike Schreiner, as he has in the past, gets whatever, 4, 5, 6% of the total vote, much of that is going to come from voters who might otherwise have voted for you. So his inclusion tonight, what did that do to the dynamic of the evening?
I think he did add something to the debate. As a voter, as an Ontarian, I really liked hearing what he had to say. I think he added some nuance and some depth, and he was the most passionate in bringing up climate change that allowed a conversation about that between all the leaders. I think that was really important. I think his moment about the nurse was really important. And I think if we had a ranked ballot, he'd probably be my second choice on that ranked ballot. And I think that, progressives need to be more focused on beating Doug Ford than on attacking each other. And I like his message of working with all members in the legislature. I like what he has done as the lone Green MPP over the past 4 years. I think he had a great night. I think he really showed up as the first time on the stage and showed what it means when we have a truly, multi-party system. So I think it added to the discourse. And I think voters who are looking for the alternative to Ford saw that Mr. Del Duca is standing up to him and has a plan to put forward. And I don't think having Mr. Schreiner there did anything to take away from that.
Let me pick up on that point you made in the midst of that answer, which is, in asking this question, I will hearken back to several episodes of the Hurley Burley, which is my second favorite political podcast to listen to, next to the On Poly podcast with the estimable John Michael McGrath and that other guy who co-hosts it with him. They've been making the point, David Hurley and Scott Reed, that the opposition parties have spent far too much time rolling out their platforms and not nearly enough time bashing Doug Ford's brains in. And I wonder whether, let's go around on this. Allison, do you think there was enough attacking the king, which after all, if you want to be the king, you got to beat the king? Did enough of that happen tonight?
I don't think so. I don't think enough of that happened at the Northern debate either. And Doug Ford really has a unique and keen sense of brushing that stuff off. I mean, even when he was being attacked on the pandemic, I mean, Stephen Del Duca got very specific. He said, you closed parks, you got police involved. And that is something that people really did not like Doug Ford for. That was another really political, terrible zone for him at that point. But Doug Ford was able to, he was just kind of like, well, I apologized and I worked 24/7. Kind of, what else do you want me to do about it? And I think, again, he kind of got off scot-free and blamed the Liberals for not having a PPE backlog and our stockpile, it had expired. And I'm not sure it hurt Doug, and I don't know what will. He's I've said it before, but he's been a real Teflon Don throughout this campaign, and it's tough to get under his skin, and that's it seems like a lot of debate prep training and staying on message, and like I said off the top of this, he just really has to not completely lose voters, and he's golden, and I think he knows that, and it seems to be working.
Jackie, did your party and the other opposition parties this evening hammer away at Doug Ford adequately enough?
I certainly think that Mike did that. He held Ford's feet to the fire on the environmental protections that he's rolled back, on his, attack on the healthcare system and on the education system. And I think that, as we've mentioned here tonight, he'd be the first one to say it's not likely on June 2nd that Mike will be the premier of this province, but it is a lot more likely that we could elect more Green MPPs in this province and hold the balance of power. And I think that Mike's performance tonight showed that having more Green MPPs, having more Green voices at Queen's Park to hold if it is Ford at the end of the day who retains power here, having Greens holding the government to account and being really clear about the things that he needs to do differently will result in better leadership in this province. Will result in not going as far on the environmental protection rollbacks that Ford has already done, and will actually result in a better democracy here.
Cameron, do you think Andrea Horwath adequately and with enough force attacked Doug Ford to create some doubt in the public's mind?
I think she did. And I think we have to remember, too, here, I think this is somehow dealing with somebody like Doug Ford. Doug Ford is a political street fighter, and his most comfortable place is to be in that street fight. You need to beat him in a way where you're not playing his game. You can go after the king and take out the king, but you're not going to beat this king by playing the king's game. And I think that's the way to look at this, is that at the end of the day, if you're going to beat Doug Ford, it's by showing yourself to be competent, showing you have the plan to actually do it. Because if you're going to get down in the mudslinging and you're going to get down in the name calling, that's where Doug Ford lives. That's where the Fords have lived their entire political career and made a connection out of it. So you're not going to beat them at their own game. And I think that's something that maybe, I know it's tempting. Like I say, there's some things that Doug Ford does that frustrates the living heck out of me because it's just so wrong. But at the same time, it's like if I spend all my time dealing with all the falsehoods he throws out there and trying to correct them, I'm not doing my job. I'm busy trying to correct whatever he's throwing out there. You really have to put your blinders on and stay focused. And I'll admit, it doesn't make for the sexiest television you'll ever watch in your life. It won't make for the greatest debate ever, but that's kind of how you have to beat him. And we'll see if it's successful or not. But fighting it his way, that's definitely not going to succeed unless you're better at it. And frankly, I don't think anyone's better at being Doug Ford than Doug Ford.
Well, you expressed your frustration on that. Hurley and Reid, Ashley, have been expressing their frustration that the Liberal leader has seemed to want to spend a great deal of time rolling out policy pronouncements and not nearly, in their judgment, enough time, as I say, colloquially speaking, bashing Doug Ford's political brains in. Did Stephen Del Duca do an adequate job of that tonight?
I think he did a really good job of balancing opposition and proposing something new and better, because people aren't necessarily just going to vote against something. They also want something to vote for. And I think he struck that balance. There were some good heated moments that spoke to a lot of the passions and frustrations that I think a lot of people across this province have felt. And I think he did a good job of showing himself as the alternative to Doug Ford and, not necessarily spending a lot of time attacking the other two non-conservative leaders on the stage. And I think that was a bit of a contrast with Ms. Horwath. But, it is really hard to mount a case for change when the polling numbers are what they are and when Ford does have this kind of folksy populist kind of mantle still wrapped around him. Like, he is fairly popular. So if you go too hard against him, that can also blow back against you. So I think that the team around Stephen Del Duca have had a really tough time striking that balance. And I get the pugilistic kind of impulse that Reid and Hurley are talking about. And I have worked with them. I respect them immensely. And I also understand the more measured and policy-driven approach and positive campaign that the current team is rolling out. So I think I can see both sides of the coin, but I think tonight that middle ground that Mr. Del Duca struck was really effective, and I think where it needed to be, and he had some good moments to poke at Mr. Ford, and I think that he did get under his collar a little bit, and I think he also put forward some really positive ideas for the people of Ontario. Okay, we got a little over a minute left here, and Kate, I'm going to give it to you in this regard. Conservative candidates out there on the hustings are not showing up to all candidates' debates in their ridings. They're not giving interviews to journalists. It's classic front-runner stuff. They just are terrified about doing anything or saying anything that might get a headline for a day that might embarrass somebody. And I just want to know, I get that. Does it do a service to voters to play this kind of peekaboo campaign?
Well, I think you do have to be accessible to voters and make sure that you're knocking on doors regularly, making yourself available in a number of different forums. Yes, this is very classic message control maneuver that happens for frontrunner campaigns and other campaigns as well. So I think there has to be a balance there, Steve, of course, between being seen to hide and making yourself available to voters. And one thing you can say about Doug Ford, I know the record in question period came up. I don't think that lands as well if Doug Ford's not having his usual press conference, if Doug Ford's not giving interviews, but he was doing all of those things every day during the pandemic, well after Justin Trudeau and the other premiers had quit their daily press conference. Doug Ford was up there talking about what he was going to do. So I think that the criticism that the PCs and Premier Ford are at all absent just won't land with voters, because what they've seen over the course of the last 2.5 years is somebody who, even in a very difficult situation, is willing to put themselves out there and defend the record.
Well, I want to thank all 5 of you because you were clearly present and accounted for this evening here at TVO. Kate Harrison, Cameron Holmstrom, Ashley Chinatti, Jackie De Silva, Allison Smith. Good of all of you to join us here on Her Majesty's Junior Public Broadcaster this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Steve.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.